I designed the entire party, every flower, every light beam, every illusion of elegance, only to realize I wasn't even meant to be seen. They smiled in public and sliced me apart in private, each compliment laced with judgment, every silence screaming my place in their hierarchy. And when they finally tore my dress in the hallway, laughing as I stood alone, something inside me didn't just break it. Reset. If you've ever been the outsider in someone else's empire, this story is for you. I was the ghost who built the palace and never got invited inside. The jasmine scent curled in the air like a secret. I adjusted the color temperature on my screen for the third time, staring at the floral lighting balance for the birthday canopy. The arrangement had to breathe effortless luxury, but not scream opulence. Vivienne hated anything that looked like it tried too hard unless it was someone trying to please her. Harper stood across from me with her tablet dutifully flipping through renderings. This version uses cooler LED tones to play off the amethyst roses, she said. Subtle but elevated. It needs to feel like dusk caught mid-breath, I murmured. Not just lit curated. I clicked save. 2 days. 2 days until the resort opened its gates to the Ashcrofts and their galaxy of curated friends. And I, Delilah Carter, the woman behind the vision, would float through the weekend like a hired hand. Unacknowledged, unwelcomed. Years ago, long before Jonathan, I'd been approached by the Ashcroft estate to redesign their Manhattan penthouse foyer. I'd skimmed the proposal and declined within an hour. Something about the tone, the way it demanded without requesting, had struck me wrong. Elegant, yes, but cold. A home designed to impress, not embrace. I should have trusted that instinct. Vivienne Ashcroft had smiled when we first met, tight-lipped and hollow-eyed. It was during a family dinner at Benoit shortly after Jonathan and I got engaged. She raised her glass to me and said, "So lovely that Jonathan's finally chosen someone with tenacity. I always say grit builds character, doesn't it?" Tenacity. Grit. I'd been scrubbed and cataloged in that moment like produce at a market. And Jonathan smiled awkwardly and reached for my hand under the table. That was his specialty. Soothing awkwardness without confronting the cause. Today, I wasn't in their penthouse as a guest. I was there on professional terms reviewing the final placements of entryway lighting and outdoor accents for the birthday weekend. A delivery man brushed past me with crates of imported peonies. I stepped aside without comment. Clarice emerged from the far end of the hallway in head-to-toe white, her sunglasses still perched atop her head indoors. She barely glanced at me. "Mother mentioned you'd be around today?" She said each word a measured exhale. "Try not to get fingerprints on the glass banisters. They're being polished for guests." I smiled. Of course. Wouldn't want to smear the family name. She blinked, caught off guard, and turned without another word. Back in the drawing room, I found Harper packing up fabric swatches. She paused and looked at me with that soft kind of hesitation she always wore when she had bad news. What I asked. She held out her phone. "I just got a confirmation email. A third-party vendor submitted a lighting proposal for the ballroom, different from ours, apparently approved by Mrs. Ashcroft herself." I stared at the screen. The design was sterile, gold filigree over cream drapes. Hotel banquet style with none of the sculptural mood I'd curated for weeks. Not even subtle sabotage, just loud clashing contradiction. "She didn't even tell you?" Harper asked. "No," I said slowly. "But she told someone." And she wanted it to be seen. Because that's how Vivienne worked. Not with confrontation, with quiet edits, with whispers over phone calls, with decisions made behind your back then handed to you like invitations. I folded the printout and tucked it into my portfolio. My stomach clenched with the familiar sting of being corrected without explanation. This birthday wasn't about celebrating a matriarch. It was about reminding everyone who still ran the show. Fine. She could have her ballroom, her lighting, her custom gold-rimmed menus. But I'd planned everything else, the flow, the atmosphere, the architecture of movement and emotion. My name was nowhere on it, but my fingerprints were in every corner. And if they believed I was invisible, if they see me as invisible, then maybe that's the best place to strike from. The only thing louder than the laughter was the sound of fabric tearing. The corridor outside the ballroom shimmered with marble and orchid arrangements. My heels tapped against polished stone as I walked careful not to let the hem of my dress drag. The lilac silk fit like breath itself, custom-stitched, matched to the Ashcroft invitation's exact Pantone code, a small act of obedience, or appeasement. When I passed a young hotel staffer balancing a tray of champagne flutes, he paused, eyes scanning me uncertainly. "Are you one of the setup crew?" He asked, voice flat but loud enough to echo. I stared at him. He flushed. Sorry. You just looked like someone who knows where every light switch is," I said, brushing past. The hallway opened into the reception vestibule, a gold-drenched antechamber strung with paper-thin crystal curtains. Music drifted in from the ballroom Mozart, or a remix of it. I spotted the seating chart perched atop a pedestal stand framed in Baroque silver. I searched for my name. Delilah Carter. Not under Ashcroft. Not beside Jonathan. Not anywhere. My fingertips rested on the edge of the frame as I scanned again slower, hoping for a printing error or a misplaced card. No. A waitress bustled by, carrying nameplates on a lacquered tray. Clarice followed closely behind her eyes, locking on mine like crosshairs. She was radiant in cream silk dripping with heirloom pearls, too elegant to be anything other than deliberate. Well, someone misunderstood the memo. She said, her tone dipped in saccharine. Mom said the dress code doesn't apply to outsiders. I said nothing. My spine refused to curl. Her gaze dropped to my dress, then to the thin seam where the zipper lay, flush along my hip. She leaned in. "Don't worry," she whispered. "You won't need to be seated for long." The next second, I felt it, a hand swift and practiced yanking the side seam. The rip sliced upward with a sickening clarity. My breath caught. The room didn't fall silent, but my world did. Laughter pealed from behind Clarice, followed by a chorus of amused gasps from the inner circle gathered at the ballroom entrance. I turned my head, slowly catching Jonathan in the distance. He stood there, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. He looked like a man watching someone else's mistake unfold. Not his wife's public humiliation, not his family's cruelty, just an unfortunate scene. I stepped backward, pressing the torn side of the dress against my thigh, willing myself to stay upright. My heels no longer felt like anchors of confidence, just ornaments tied to a stage I never wanted to perform on. No one stopped me as I turned and walked away. Not a word, not a hand. In my suite, the silence wrapped around me like gauze, soothing antiseptic. I sat at the edge of the bed legs, trembling, still holding the shredded fabric. I didn't cry. I didn't even curse. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened the app. It had been a side project once built with a tech client who believed luxury events needed live override systems, lighting, sound, music, even catering coordination. Redundancies within redundancies. Only a handful of people ever used it. I had designed the backdoor protocols myself. Vivian never asked about tech. She only approved paper. My thumb hovered over the dashboard, breath slowing. The resort's central systems loaded. I selected the main hall. A few clicks, a confirmation prompt. Disable primary audio-visual functions. Yes, one tap. Done. The music would fade within minutes. The spotlights would flicker. The customized stage cues, lighting choreography, and ambient transitions all gone. This wasn't sabotage. Not really. It was subtraction. If I'm not invited to the table, maybe no one deserves dinner. No music, no lighting, no applause. Just silence and a table full of confusion. The lights didn't die all at once. They sputtered, staggered like a chandelier gasping its last breath. First, the pin spots above the dessert table blinked out, then the amber washes along the floral arch. The piano playlist clipped mid-chord, leaving an odd half-silence. Guests murmured, shifting in their seats, glancing upward as the ballroom dimmed into an eerie half-light. A woman in a satin shawl leaned toward her husband, whispering something that made him frown. On the far end of the table, a man tapped his wine glass as if that would restart the music. A tech staffer with a headset slipped through the curtains, eyes wide, whispering into his mic. Power outage? No. The chandeliers over the hallway were still glowing. The emergency sconces stayed warm. But the ballroom where Vivienne had constructed her throne was unraveling one silent second at a time. Vivienne rose from her seat. She didn't shout. Not yet. She smoothed her gown and gave a practiced, bemused smile, the kind she wore when vendors forgot to bow. "It seems we're having a brief hiccup," she said, glancing around with grace cultivated over decades. "Marco will sort it momentarily." Marco, the resort manager, was already in the wings, his earpiece flickering with static, but he made no sudden moves. No orders barked. Instead, he scanned the room until his gaze found me standing at the rear, still in the torn lilac dress, unannounced and unmoved. I nodded once. That was the cue. He disappeared backstage. I walked forward slowly, heels steady, the hush of the ballroom wrapping around me like velvet. The crowd parted as I approached, some recognizing me from whispers, others too caught in the tension to question anything. I passed Clarice, who went rigid in her seat. Jonathan looked as though someone had slipped ice down the back of his collar. And Vivienne watched me with the precision of someone identifying a threat far too late. I stopped just shy of the head table. "My apologies for the interruption," I said, my voice calm but clear. "The lighting, sound, and catering schedules have been canceled. Per contract terms, this event is officially suspended." Vivienne blinked, on whose authority, she said, voice sharp for the first time all night. I pulled the resort badge from my purse and dropped it on the linen tablecloth. "Mine, as event coordinator and co-owner of this venue." A silence thudded into place. Someone at the far end dropped a fork. Clarice's lips parted, ready to speak, then clamped shut again. I took a breath, feeling the hum of control coil around my spine. Not rage, not revenge, just clarity. "If I've been excluded from this party," I said, "I'm simply returning the favor. The party is over." The words landed without echo. No applause, just the stunned air of a ballroom gone rogue. Vivienne stood fully now, hands gripping the back of her chair. Her voice tore through the quiet. "Who gave you that right?" I didn't blink. "The same woman you didn't invite," I said. "Me." Turns out I wasn't just the help. I was the landlord. The conference room was lit only by the recessed fixtures along the ceiling, cool clinical light bouncing off the polished marble table. No music, no champagne flutes, no laughter now. Just the echo of expensive heels and reputations slipping. Vivienne sat at the head of the table, rigid and silent. Her lipstick slightly smudged, her poise thinning by the minute. Jonathan hovered behind her, unsure whether to sit or stand, his presence more ghostly than mine had ever been. Marco entered quietly and stood by my side. He held the resort's administrative binder against his chest like a shield, but his eyes were steady. Vivienne finally spoke. "Get her out of here." Her voice cracked like a gavel, sharp and practiced. Marco didn't move. "She's trespassing," Vivienne continued. "This is a private family function." "We follow the instructions of the registered owner," Marco said calmly. Silence fell again, heavier this time. I placed the leather portfolio on the table and opened it to the notarized transfer agreement. A single-page summary sat on top the paper she never thought she'd need to see. 3 months ago, I began while helping Jonathan untangle one of his failed property flips. I noticed this resort was listed as collateral on a private loan. I turned toward Jonathan, whose eyes widened slightly. "What you didn't realize," I continued, "was that the Ashcroft family had already defaulted on that loan." I tracked the debt, found the shell company Vivienne used to offload it, and acquired the entire note. I laid down the stamped acquisition form. As of 6 weeks ago, D. Carter Enterprises holds controlling interest in Ashcroft Holdings Resort Division. Vivienne paled. "You're bluffing," she whispered. Marco cleared his throat and laid his own copy of the registration on the table. "This is accurate. She's been listed as the beneficial owner on internal systems since the transfer. All staff have been instructed accordingly." Vivienne's hand twitched toward her glass but stopped halfway. "You tried to resell the resort to cover your private debt," I said without board approval. "I have the wire instructions and the email you sent to the broker in Prague." Her mouth opened and closed, but no words emerged. I turned to Jonathan. You once told me transparency was the foundation of your business, I said. Turns out you're just as opaque as everyone else at this table. He took a step forward, hands raised. Delilah, I handed him a sealed envelope. He stared at it as if it might burn his fingers. Those are draft divorce papers, I said. Filed in Manhattan. Effective the moment you or your family attempts to contact me outside legal counsel. He didn't open the envelope, just stared at it like a tombstone. Vivian stood abruptly, knocking her chair back with a screech. Her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with rage, untempered by control. You arrogant little, she began, and then she lunged. Marco stepped forward, but I didn't flinch. She stopped just short of me, trembling. You humiliated the woman who saved your family's only remaining asset, I said, voice low but unshaking. You thought I was decoration, a favor Jonathan dragged in from Soho. But I read every line of your contracts while you skimmed headlines. She stepped back, shaken. Jonathan's phone buzzed. Loud, urgent. He glanced at the screen, then again, a second longer. What is it? Vivian asked, still breathing hard. He swallowed. An SEC alert, he muttered. They've flagged our firm's recent filings. Something about asset declarations. I have to respond. The empire didn't burn in flames. It unraveled thread by thread, silently, relentlessly. The morning after the party, the resort lobby was a study in quiet chaos. Staff tiptoed behind counters, bellhops glanced nervously at their phones, and guests checked out early with polite excuses and veiled curiosity. A vase of orchids on the concierge desk had toppled overnight, its blooms wilting into the marble. Upstairs, in the calm hush of my suite, I sipped black coffee and watched the world react. The first article dropped at 7:13 a.m., an exclusive from a mid-tier financial blog, Ashcroft Legacy Party cut short by ownership dispute. 10 minutes later, a more serious headline arrived, anonymous tipster flags unreported loans in Ashcroft Family Holdings. By 8:00 a.m., screenshots of Vivian's stunned expression captured by a party guest's Instagram story had gone viral. Legacy Vivian once told me wasn't about truth. It was about appearances. I wondered how she felt about appearances now. My inbox was flooded. Legal consultants confirming asset control. Former clients offering congratulations. Harper had sent a one-line message that made me smile. Elegant detonation. Respect. A soft knock at the door. Jonathan, I opened it. He stood there in yesterday's suit, crumpled, and lost a man who'd finally realized the throne he sat on was cardboard. Can I come in? He asked. No. He exhaled. The media's eating this alive. My firm's investors are panicking. I just need a moment. I let the silence stretch. He stepped closer, hands pleading. Let's make a deal. Quietly, I'll issue a statement. Say you're not involved, that this was just a miscommunication. I stepped into the hall, closing the door behind me. You had silence, I said, when you watched them break me. When Clarice tore my dress. When Vivian had me erased from the seating chart. He flinched. I didn't want this, he whispered. You didn't stop it either. He opened his mouth to protest, but I was already turning away. You didn't lose a wife, I said over my shoulder. You lost your cover. As I walked back inside, my phone buzzed. A voice message from one of the Ashcroft family's lawyers played automatically, panicked and scrambling, asking for clarification, begging to delay asset transfer filings. Below it, a new message blinked in, Mom. You've protected yourself. Now let go. I stared at the screen for a long time, coffee cooling in my hand. They tried to erase me from one dinner. I rewrote the guest list of their entire legacy. The morning air was crisp, laced with salt from the Atlantic and the faint scent of lavender from the lobby diffuser. I moved with quiet precision, packing the last of my belongings, folding the torn dress as if it deserved dignity after all it had endured. I placed it in tissue paper, set it in my bag, and then reached for the monogrammed stationery left on the desk. I wrote slowly, clearly, no flourish, just clarity. You didn't exclude me. You liberated me. I left the note in Vivian's suite, slipped just beneath the edge of the unmade bed. The room was silent. She hadn't said a word since last night. Not to the staff, Not to her son, not to me. The queen of veiled remarks finally dethroned by nothing more than acknowledgement. Downstairs, the checkout counter was manned by a young staffer who stood straighter when he saw me. He offered a hesitant smile. "Everything's arranged, Ms. Carter," he said. "Thank you," I replied. Jonathan was already in the lobby pacing. He looked like he hadn't slept, though I doubted he'd earned the right to rest. As I approached, he stepped into my path. "Delilah," I didn't stop. "Just wait," he said, his voice cracking. "Please, name your price." I paused. There's no number for what I reclaimed. He flinched as though the words were physical. I stepped past him and out the revolving doors. My car was waiting black and sleek against the gravel driveway. The driver opened the door, nodded silently. As we pulled away, the resort growing smaller behind us, I stared at the ocean. Waves folding over themselves just like I had until I didn't. My phone chimed. An email subject line, Design Lead Inquiry, Carter House Rome Initiative. I opened it. "Ms. Carter. We were impressed with your work at Ashcroft Resort and would like to formally invite you to spearhead the creative direction of our upcoming resort line in Italy. Flexible terms, full autonomy. Let's discuss Rome first." At the bottom was a button, Accept Offer. I didn't hesitate. I clicked. Then typed, "Let's discuss Rome first." The car curved along the coastal road windows, down hair caught in the breeze. I watched the horizon clean wide and mine. I gave up trying to fit into a legacy and started building my own. ChatGPT Jun Noi. The silence Delilah left behind was not emptiness, it was the sound of power reclaimed. In a world that measured worth by lineage and legacy, she reminded them that quiet resolve could undo dynasties thread by thread. Justice didn't need a spotlight. It needed precision, patience, and the courage to act when silence became complicity. Like truth buried beneath polished lies, it only takes one crack for everything to unravel. Sometimes walking away isn't surrender, it's a declaration that you'll never again kneel to anyone who mistook your grace for weakness.